included a mud hut wing of green extremists, which I took to include EB, and you called the Premier of British Columbia an ideological zealot who's not on Team Canada.
Conspiracy theorist, misinformation. You know, if there's anything I've come to learn, it's usually that whoever is accusing somebody of being those things is actually doing it themselves. That's why they're so familiar with the word, right? What a thing to use all of those tactics in order to mislead and manipulate your base, rally them up, only to then be called out on national television. David Eby got absolutely destroyed by a former Liberal MP who myth-busted his claims, and then the entire Liberal government as a whole got wrecked on CTV News. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, like, follow, and comment your thoughts down below.
Mr. Speaker, this government has a true plan to build one Canadian economy. And when it comes to building one economy, we've made sure that we would have important national major projects, and we've announced them in the energy sector, including in LNG. And of course, he should ask the Premier of Alberta what she thinks about that.
Right.
The other thing also I would like to say is that the GDP is actually growing, and look at the last numbers in July. And when you look at also what is happening in the country, wages are increasing. And indeed, when you saw 3.3% of growing wages across the country,
holy moly, with talking points like that, you'd think the elbows up crowd would be wondering, why am I so mad about Trump's tariffs then? I think it's because she's not being totally transparent here. I am just so irritated by all of this cherry-picked data. Yes, in July of 2025, StatsCan reported a very modest 0.2% increase of GDP over the month. Per capita GDP has been flat or declining for almost all of the past 2 years, though, and population growth through immigration is what is propping up that headline number. The average Canadian is not getting richer. They know this. I'm so tired of them manipulating it to their base. Because then you see all of these liberal trolls in the comment sections. Oh, we actually have the best GDP per cap. No, we don't. No, we don't. Actually, the OECD and IMF project that Canada is going to be last or second last in G7 for per capita GDP growth in the years 2024 to 2025. So,
And what we're hearing in response to that is Liberal MPs essentially expressing hurt feelings or not liking what they're hearing, trying to disagree with claims from witnesses about the problems. And I just want to point out that, the unemployment numbers are both brutal and objective. The unemployment numbers don't respond to the feelings of anybody around the table. They tell the story. And what we're hearing from the witnesses, but more critically what we're seeing in the Statistics Canada numbers, is demonstration of the failures of the government. You can say we've tried to put in place all these programs, but my question is, are those programs working? And that's what we see in the numbers that show that it's not working, that the unemployment crisis continues to get worse, and that whatever the government says about its efforts, they're not reversing the trend that has resulted from decisions they've made.
Investment in Canadian industries has totally lagged behind. Some of it completely been evaporated as they move to the United States where it's surging. And just the reality check here. How dare you say all of that? See, we're doing so great when we have record food bank usage, some of the highest household debt to income ratios, and surveys that are coming out all the time showing that Canadians feel worse off financially than they did 10 years ago. And every single one of these lies, this manipulation, this gaslighting, I'm so tired of being in an abusive relationship with our government already. Just be honest, is it that freaking hard? It isn't, because the Conservatives are quite regularly, actually.
Well, the first thing is I would not, and I did not, make promises that I could not keep. Mark Carney said, quote, he will handle Trump. He will, quote, negotiate a win. He said he'd have a deal by July 21st. He's broken all of those promises. He hasn't handled Trump. Quite frankly, it's the other way around.
But if Conservatives are just these scary, radical conspiracy theorists, I'll ask you this. Why are Trump tariffs such a big deal? Why do they make an impact? Why do they even make a dent? If we are strong and secure and we have so much going for us right now, why do we care? Why are we jet setting around the globe to sign freaking declarations of intent, to have photo ops that lead to absolutely nothing, just more tax dollars wasted? Why are we begging other nations to trade with us if everything is just easy peasy here? If the Liberals have done such a great job over the last 10 years, none of that makes any sense, does it? Finding out the truth here is actually quite simple. All you have to do is look at what they say and then look at what they're trying to make you afraid of. Something there doesn't add up, probably because what they're trying to make you afraid of is the truth, and what they say is a lie.
Yes, Mike. This federal tanker ban was a joke when they brought it in, and it's a joke now. And the reason it is because the Americans are shipping bitumen along the west coast of British Columbia from Alaska down past all the way down the coast. And they're doing it almost every day. The tanker ban doesn't affect them. And guess what? There haven't been any bitumen spills. So I think there's some myth busting that has to happen. There's a pathway to yes that has to be defined. And then there's the issue of the British Columbia government, the EB government, which is dead scared of any conversation about oil on the North Coast. I think British Columbians, if it went to a referendum, I think people would pass it. But the NDP base will not accept a David Eby government supporting this project.
Well, dare I say it's about time. Next week, Prime Minister Mark Carney is going to be heading to Washington to personally meet with President Trump over tariffs. But depending on where you get your news, this is either some high stakes negotiation of which Canada really does not have a lot of leverage here, if any, or it's just another round of political theater. Left-leaning outlets frame it as Carney standing up to Trump's trade pressure. Right-leaning headlines focus on the 51st state comments and the drama. Center outlets are really just reporting on the meeting date and trade context. But this is exactly why I have been using Ground News for years. It's a website and an app that shows you how different outlets cover the exact same story. And their blind spot feature helps you see stories that your side may be missing or that the world in general is missing as a whole. I'm pretty tired of the emotional spin pretending to be journalism these days. And if you're only reading one side, you are missing the entire other half of the story. If you want the truth without any drama and no spin at all, and actually just transparency as to where that drama and spin may be coming from, head to ground.news/Jasmine, where you can get 40% off their Vantage plan. And you can also scan the QR code on screen. Every single subscription directly supports me, and it also helps Ground News keep on breaking through all of the noise and just giving you the facts.
Here's the problem. David Eby is smart enough to know that there is no current private sector proponent because the current policy setting of the federal government makes that impossible. Like, he's been totally disingenuous. He's smart enough to know that with the tanker ban, with the emissions cap on the oil sands, which means the oil sands companies cannot do any significant new greenfield development to increase production by 1 million barrels a day, let's say, and with C-69 continuing to be a point of huge uncertainty around approvals, that no proponent is going to come to the table after TC Energy lost something like $1 billion on the Energy East process that got bogged down in regulatory uncertainty, right. And Enbridge lost $1 billion on the initial Northern Gateway proposal. So I think the government of Alberta is doing the right thing to step in. And by the way, there's a precedent for this, in a way, which is that in the early 1970s, Peter Lougheed, who was very much a free market guy, stepped in, created a Crown Corporation, the Alberta Energy Corporation, to help capitalize the early oil sands developments and technology, because he understood the enormous value to Alberta, but that it wasn't yet economically feasible.
Right. But the arguments you laid out as to why there is no private sector proponent, we heard that from the CEO of Enbridge in a speech today. We heard that from Premier Danielle Smith. Her acting as a proponent, though, doesn't change that reality, right? So,
but it's a government that's willing to take the risk. And by the way, there's another precedent here, which is the Trudeau government buying the Trans Mountain project from Kinder Morgan. Now, I argue that, as do many others, that that never should have had to happen. Like Kinder Morgan should have had the clear regulatory runway to capitalize the project and take on board that risk for their shareholders, but they didn't. And so the government of Canada stepped in and de-risked it. So
one thing that I just have to say, and it's hilarious that he is talking to David Cochrane, is David Cochrane was talking to Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, after she made this announcement. And look at this smug little gremlin.
You talk about this, a big moment for the country. Respecting provincial jurisdiction is a big moment for the country. And we saw with TMX, the British Columbia resistance is something that takes extreme efforts to overcome. Right? Do you think the federal government's not going to build this one, right?
I think that would be a failure of the process. If every project that gets on the major project list requires the federal government to shell out tens of billions of dollars, then we'll have failed at the exercise. The exercise is in attracting back the $500 billion or more that has vacated Canada.
Oh man, the misinformation, misleading, gaslighting that takes place amongst liberals is truly something. There should be an award show. There really should. I think there'd be too many people who would win first place, though. But let's just quickly go back to the facts here, the truth, which is that in order to keep TMX alive after years of delays, lawsuits, protests, and new federal environmental regulations, Kinder Morgan said, we're walking away unless we get certainty that it's completed. The Trudeau government couldn't do that. That's why they bought the project at, what was it, $4.5 billion? In short, it was Canada's own policy, our own permitting environment that scared off the private owner, and we've seen nothing but that just double down.
So if the tanker ban is removed, if we get to the right spot on carbon levies and emission taxes, and our customers therefore have the ability to produce a product that is produced amazingly relative to other parts of the world, then I think that opportunity is there. But again, one only has to look to the past. If the conditions are set, capital will go to where the conditions are set. And today the conditions are not set for that pipeline to exist in Canada. It's existing in other parts of the world, and seems to me, and I think most Canadians, if you look at opinion polling, I think we're talking about 88% of people recognize and believe that the oil and gas industry is critical to Canada, and about 75% are supportive of building oil pipelines. We're not there yet, let's be honest.
No, I take your point on that, but we are at this point today because the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has promised to turn Canada into an energy superpower. From your vantage point,
right,
is that feasible? Can Canada truly be an energy superpower?
Absolutely. I mean, we have supplies of, you pick it from uranium to natural gas to oil to gold. I mean, we have everything set up. The only thing that's stopping us is ourselves. I mean, we have the need. There are 7 billion people on the planet that don't have the same access to energy that we do in North America. We have an obligation, a moral obligation, I think, to help them move to use the products that we have in this country. And let's not forget, we produce oil and gas, amongst other things, amongst the cleanest of any nations.
Doesn't it just make you feel kind of embarrassed and ashamed that other nations don't have to beg countries to do trade with them? They don't have to go on stage and get these raving press reviews by whom they fund, declaring that they're going to be an economic energy superpower. No, they don't have to do that, because instead of talking about it, they actually get it done.
But you also said David Eby is objectively a much bigger threat to Confederation and to the rule of law than Alberta separatists. You talked about the law being clear, as we learned with TMX. But you talk about a conversation, I guess, you had with the late John Horgan, where you said that his party, he told you, included a mud hut wing of green extremists, which I took to include Eby. And you called the Premier of British Columbia an ideological zealot who's not on Team Canada. That's a lot, Jason Kenney. I mean, but why go there? I mean, what does that do to this?
Well, I was watching Eby pretending to be part of Team Canada, be Captain Canada, the guy who's given the Chinese shipyard this subsidized by the Chinese government and the People's Liberation Army these shipping jobs. He found himself in a convenience store in Tokyo when the first ministers were meeting about creating one Canadian economy, knocking down trade barriers. And now he's standing in the way of the single largest potential project to create wealth and diversify exports that is on offer in the Canadian economy when he has absolutely no legal or constitutional authority to do so. He is a lawyer, but he is performatively acting like a demagogue right now. He knows that the Constitution, Section 9210 of the 1867 Constitution Act, gives the federal government exclusive authority over interprovincial infrastructure, including pipelines, as reaffirmed unanimously by both the BC Appeals Court and the Supreme Court of Canada quite recently. And so the reason I say he's a bigger threat, I don't think the Alberta separatists, the hardcore separatists, are actually a serious threat. I think they're a very small minority. But this is a BC premier using his office to violate and threaten the Constitution and to say to patriotic Albertans and Saskatchewan residents that he's going to try to use his political authority against the clear letter of the Constitution to block provinces from exporting what they produce, which is undermining the entire premise of Confederation as an economic union.
Well, I don't know if he spelled out any specific action that he would take to stop it, other than to point out there is, as a point of fact, no private sector proponent right now for all the reasons that we've discussed.
I would argue that what the Bloc is doing, as well as what David Eby is doing, is actually attempting to actively thwart any confidence in our investment sector in this country by speaking down on it so massively, especially when you have the past that we do. TMX as a prime example, and all of the other proposals that didn't make it on the list of national projects that are going to build our unity in Canada, whatever the hell that title is. I would argue that every single one of those, it is a treasonous attempt to ensure that your country is crippled because you serve your ideology and your global elites far more than you serve any Canadian, our future, and our prosperity.
And that he doesn't support the idea, but he's not alone in that, right? We spoke with Marilyn Slett earlier in the show. You know, she's with the Coastal First Nations Great Bear Initiative, sort of the group of First Nations who have land around Prince Rupert. They don't want this either. And there's a duty to consult with them, and they do not want an oil pipeline coming in, and they don't want that added tanker traffic on top of what's already there from LNG.
You know, David, I find it passing strange that the CBC in particular, but also other media outlets, so rarely seem to interview the pro-development First Nations. They seem to get pushed out of the camera, so to speak. The majority of Western Canadian First Nations support responsible resource development, and this was tested on the Trans Mountain expansion. The Supreme Court of Canada upheld a finding of the trial court in BC on that the duty to consult had been properly undertaken, the honour of the Crown was discharged, and that of the 119 proximate or interested Indigenous communities in that project, that 110 of them either supported it or were neutral. So I think I just encourage media to find balanced voices amongst Indigenous communities who are increasingly involved through equity participation and would be the single largest winners in terms of investment, but also employment in a major project of the state.
Well, look, you know, I take your point that there are, but, you know, we've spoken with the NISCA leadership about their LNG proponent. In that very chair, pro-development, pro-pipeline, pro-economic corridor.
Ellis Ross would be a good example.
Well, yes, absolutely. But on the C5 summits, we have had them on the show talking about it. I know there are people in favor of this. There are First Nations in favor of it.
So you admit you know. You just choose not to focus on them because that's how the narrative gets created. And then you have all of these bills to ensure that that narrative is the absolute loudest. I wanted to talk about so much stuff coming out of committee right now when it comes to internet censorship. But I feel like I'm just going to do a solid episode about that tomorrow. So be sure you're listening to it. But I wanted to point out too, do you want to know what happens to Canada if we continue down the track that we are on? And you know what? I really do hope that something great comes out of Mark Carney jet setting to the United States again to go meet with Donald Trump. I hope something good comes of that. But the fact that Global News is slow dripping us articles like, should Ottawa raise the GST to pay down debt or fund more spending, makes me think that we're kind of screwed. Because that's a weird article to write if Mark Carney, Melanie Joly, Francois-Philippe Champagne, all of those people who keep saying Canada's a utopia, we're doing just fine. If that was true, why would you be wanting outlets of which you fund to start posting about potentially raising the GST, raising taxes, even though you just gave us that shocking 1% tax cut?
What do you think would really be the benefit of this key Liberal affordability plan?
Nothing. Frankly, it's an embarrassment. If this is their key signature tax policy, it's embarrassing to Canada, and it should be embarrassment to anybody that understands tax, which unfortunately not many do.
Unless you were hoping that they could try to brace the impact by getting people mad about it now so that when it actually comes through, because there's no other options, because you continue to fail and be incompetent and malicious and evil, that they won't be as angry with you about it. And then potentially, let's just say hypothetically, that this meeting with Donald Trump doesn't yield any results like we have so frequently seen over the last number of months. When you decide to possibly call an election at some point in time in the near future, you could maybe win a majority because you still have Donald Trump as the bad guy. Everybody's too busy focused on that instead of focusing on what you're actually doing to us. Just a thought. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, like, follow, and comment your thoughts down below. And if you're still watching this, thank you so much. I'm going to issue, I guess, somewhat of a plea here, but I've noticed YouTube has not been recommending my videos like it once did to new people. It's an algorithm thing. And I almost wonder if a portion of what we are going to be talking about tomorrow is behind that here in Canada. So with that, if you feel like it, if you liked this, if you get any benefit at all from the content that I share with you, feel free to share it, engage with it as much as you can. Do that for everybody who you watch on YouTube, especially in Canada. Like it is so insane to me how much more difficult it is to be an independent anything in this country compared to how it is in other countries. We just have too many gosh darn rules and laws and censorship, don't we? Can't say that one, though. That would make me a conspiracy theorist, right? Anyway, I will talk to you tomorrow. I hope you have a beautiful day and take care.